socialist shelf and part 2 of our 3-body problem episode. If you enjoy this episode, why don't you just, go and tell somebody about it? Just anybody, It doesn't have to be someone you know. You could really just go up to someone in public. I'm being told that maybe that's not the best call, but hey, get the word out. Get the word out. People need to know this. People need to know about the socialist shelf. People need to know about the 3-body problem. And people need to know that part 2 of this episode is starting right now.
But yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a book about gaming, I would say. Joss, give us the rundown on 3-body, the video game.
Yes, so he sees this other member of the Frontiers of Science who is still living. He sees this person playing a game called 3-body. Shen Yufei is her name. She's not super important to the narrative outside of that, but
she's this character that's tangentially caught up in all these circles.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And we'll see her again. But
yes.
The important thing is that Wang Miao, he gets turned on to this game called 3-body. What is 3-body? Well, he jacks into this this full dive full sensation like VR suit, like you feel heat, you feel cold, you feel pain and whatnot, and he's in this virtual world, and it's set now during
A chaotic
essentially
period.
A chaotic period in a fantasy version of like ancient China. Essentially, like he interacts with King Zhou of Shang and other royals from
right, and he's like
kind of
wandering. Yeah, and he's wandering this waste where the sun in the sky is just it comes up, it comes down, it stays out for a long time, it turns to night for a long time. So naturally the weather is incredibly inconsistent. You'll see you'll have moments of this intense heat, of intense cold, and basically the people who are playing the game along with them, as well as the NPCs, everyone very vested in the world, is like, yes, well, that's because we're in a chaotic period where things are just random. There are also stable periods, which means you have your normal 24-hour cycle, or what have you. And basically the goal of the game from the beginning is figuring out how to predict the difference in the chaotic eras and the stable eras before your civilization kind of collapses, because only in a stable era or a well understood chaotic era can you of course build a civilization constructively. Because what if the sun is out for 3 weeks straight, everything's fried. If the sun doesn't come out for a year, then nothing can grow. And the Denzians of this world have the ability to dry themselves out and store themselves in these, it's a very funny image, in these basically like giant granaries, basically, to last between these chaotic cycles. And there are these different rulers posted up in gigantic pyramids representing of different periods, and these great scientists who are players, in the forms of different scientists throughout history, Copernicus and what Galileo and what have you, it's many different ones coming to these kings and rulers with different concepts to explain how the world works. And if you mess it up, you get burned in a great fire, and you are banned from the game permanently.
Burned in a great fire, or indeed, frozen in an incredible polar apocalypse.
There's that, yes.
Yeah. There's any number. There's any number of ways that this world could end.
But if you get executed, though, you get banned from the game. Notably.
Oh yeah.
If you die due to the nature, you can come back. But if you get killed by one of the kings, you're permabanned.
Right. So you have to demonstrate, some continued kind of utility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very Scheherazade sort of approach to scientific advancement.
Yeah.
And hence the crux of the game, right? Hence the object of it, which is to figure out some sort of logic to the changing conditions of this world, because it transpires, part of figuring out the contours of this world is that, there's 3 suns, and they interact with each other. Their orbit has these unpredictable sort of motions, and thus unpredictable sort of effects on this world of the game. Seemingly unpredictable, but there is a sort of logic to it. So
well, Wang is the one who figures out there are three suns, though, because from the beginning,
yes.
that's the first step, is figuring out what's going on. The answer: there are three suns. You're being chucked around gravitationally between three suns, and the only time there's stability is when you're rotating around just one star. So naturally, things could get really bad. There could be three stars. Oh wow, well, everybody's fried.
Right.
All kinds of things can happen because you are in this three-body problem. And the question is, how do you accurately predict the three-body problem? You have a long period prior to that, everyone's just trying to figure out what's going on. And you have people who are like, well, the whole world's in this giant egg. And there's another guy who says the sun is the eye of God, and we got to lull him to sleep with a, what was it? With a big,
the big pendulum thing that
big
they build.
Pendulum. There's all kinds of ideas that people are throwing out there. And most of them are wrong. And it is, our protagonist Wang, who is able to figure it out, that the three-body problem is the thing in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And that's most of the second act of the book, is him going through these various attempts to figure this stuff out. And
mathematically, yeah.
Yeah, and through his efforts, and through the combined efforts indeed of the people in the game, they actually managed to advance civilization fairly far, because it's a linear sort of progression, right? You start out in this sort of a Bronze Age, and you're trying to get to the conceit initially, right, is that you're trying to figure out how to plan around these stable versus chaotic areas sufficiently to get human civilization to survive to this computing age, where then presumably you're able to create the equations and develop the mathematical disciplines necessary to figure all this shit out.
Though some of them do say, guy like me doesn't need a computer to compute. And they get an army of, 100 million guys to stand out in the fields and create a human computer. It's very interesting. A very interesting, very creative moment where they just have all these people acting as circuits in a circuit board to try and compute the the trajectory of the planets and the sun, and planet and the suns and all that. All these different attempts. And the point, however, is not that not to figure it out. The point is that it is futile. The point is that it can't be solved, that the three-body problem is far too complex to solve, that there is no fundamental answer. And the game concludes by all the remaining players, everyone who hasn't either rage quit or been banned from the game, being brought together at the end of the world, where it's this civilization that is sufficiently developed to be able to withstand most periods, but knowing, eventually we're going to be fried by one of these suns. The way math works is one of these days we're going to fall into one of our suns, or something really bad is going to happen. And they're saying, we're giving up on our planet. We're building spaceships. We are going out to find another planet to live on, because we just cannot survive here anymore. And the whole thing has been a front for, you guessed it, aliens.
Exactly. Yes. An organization is behind the development of this game, which is the ETO, the Earth Trisolaris organization, because indeed that is the world that this game actually represents, is Trisolaris. It's this planet somewhere out near the Alpha Centauri system.
Yeah, it's the closest star. Yeah.
Yes. And the history of this civilization is it's alluded to throughout the narrative of the game, right? It transpires that there were these other inhabited planets that were frozen or burned or fell into one or another sun, and this is the last one.
Right, exactly. So you see the stakes, you see the tension on this planet, and the Trisolarans themselves have evolved with this, meaning they can literally drive themselves out. They have evolved that ability to survive the chaotic eras. But nevertheless, they know they are ultimately doomed. It's all just sort of, it's a game of chance. And so they desperately reached out to the entire universe saying like, "Are you there?" Sending out a message. They're interested. They're looking, and they get a message from a little planet not too far from them. That would be planet Earth, and that we'll get the explanation of that message in a minute. But basically, well, you want to go into it now, even though it gets explained a little later. The book, explaining this book's plot is a little difficult.
yeah, it's because it's back and forth, and I'm not, I'm not complaining about the back and forth nature of it, because the way that
No, it's neat. It's neat.
Yeah, the way that it unfolds and adds context is pretty brilliant. But yeah, so it transpires that Ye Wenjie by this time is privy to all the alien shit going down at Red Coast.
Yeah,
and,
back in the day.
Yes, back in the day. And she at this time has some time has passed, and she's met with the with three of the Red Guards, with three of the four Red Guards who were responsible for her father's death. The fourth one drowned in a river somewhere, I believe.
Yeah.
But the other three are, they're old, they're fading. They're one of them's lost an arm. But they're wholly unrepentant for their role in Wenjie's father's death, even though, he was later rehabilitated.
Yeah.
And it's based on this encounter with these people that she decides, you know what? Humanity isn't worth saving. And she's had first contact with the Trisolarans by this time. And the message that she has received from the Trisolarans is, do not respond.
Yeah, it's a random pacifist on Trisolaris gets the message saying, hey, we're out here, we're Earth. And he's like, oh, shoot. No. My planet's going to invade their planet. And he makes this call at his own expense to say, do not respond. They won't be able to find you. They won't be able to triangulate your location. But she decides, nah, my world's not worth saving. And It is pretty brilliant because it explains why the radio waves haven't gotten other planets before. And it's simply because radio waves don't have the power to travel that far, and you need a lot more power to project. And she figures out this neat trick where she can use the sun's gravitational field to sort of launch the message from the sun and project it way farther, which is an interesting bit of hard science. There's a lot of interesting bits of hard science in this book. This guy is very clever.
Yeah,
I mean, it's remarkable. The whole book is brilliant,
Yeah, I'm not a hard science guy. Like, I found myself kind of skimming the stuff where it gets into the intricacies of the physics and whatnot. But that being said, the conceit of it, the structure of it is really quite interesting, because as it happens, the humans and the Trisolarans have inverse problems, right? Like, we know the distance that this is coming to us from, so we can infer the origin of this stuff, right? Like, we don't know. Wenjie's baffled at first because before she figures out that she can reflect this thing through the sun, she doesn't know where this thing's coming from. But once she figures out that portion of it, she's like, okay, so we have roughly the distance at which it should be broadcasting from. So now I can divine the location, and she concludes, okay, yeah, it's Alpha Centauri. But the Trisolarans have the opposite problem. They know the direction that Earth is in based on what they hear from Wenjie, but they don't know the distance, right? And
turns out not far.
Yeah, not far.
Relative.
Yes, relative to the size of the universe. Yes, and it's actually really interesting because you see, like, right down to the wording used for Ye Wenjie versus this pacifist Trisolaran. Like, it's the same words used. Like, here we go. I'll read you this passage. As
same words used to describe her conditions as well.
Just how alone that they are. So here we go. Ye felt this interminable wave was an abstract view of the universe. This wave that she's seeing, that's like an indicator of the strength of the signal. One end connected to the endless past, the other to the endless future, and in the middle only the ups and downs of random chance, without life, without pattern, the peaks and valleys at different heights like uneven grains of sand, the whole curve like a one-dimensional desert made up of all the grains of sand lined up in a row, lonely, desolate, so long that it was intolerable. You could follow it and go forward or backward as long as you liked. but you'd never find the end. So that's on her, that's on our planet, of course. That's from her end. And let me find it again.
You get something very similar on the end of the Trisolaran, the
Yeah,
lonely Trisolaran.
literally like 100 pages later, like he felt this interminable wave was an abstract view of the universe, one end connected to the endless past, the other to the endless future, and in the middle, on and on and on. You can follow it, go forward or backward as long as you liked, but you never find the end. And it's this really beautiful moment once you see it from their perspective of this isolation, as different as we are evolutionarily, historically, culturally, it's this desire to not be alone in the universe that unites these drastically different life forms, and it's
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just across that commonality across this sort of scale is something that I find really beautiful in Liu.
And I think Liu Cixin's like his particular way of expressing it is interesting, right? Because like the poet mindset of this sort of existential emptiness would be to look at the darkness of space, the distance to the stars, the this and the that. But he's talking about, oh, this is the flicker of the background radiation of the universe, something that I would have not really thought about, the sort of radio signals that come in, but the standardness of it is what is used. And it's this scientist mindset to express something very poetic that I also really appreciate, because it's just not an angle I think about on it, but it's the angle sort of the sort of the physicist might take on thinking about these grandiose issues. And so yeah, and it allows these things to connect. But of course, due to the skepticism of Ye and about her fellow man, and just how brutal things have been, and not just here. She knows things are very bad across the world. She's all around the world. The Cold War is brewing, and things are tense. Things are even tense between China and the Soviets at this point. And the first inklings of, while climate change isn't being discussed, the first inklings of like discussion of environmental destruction is happening. And she's like, we do not have the capacity to take care of our own problems as humans. We cannot take care of our own problems. We do not deserve to take care of our own problems. Just come and take this world from us, because y'all must be better than us. It's made in a moment of darkness. It's made in a moment of weakness, and it's a decision she has to double down on making, because at this point, like she's made her call, like she's made her call. She's sold out to humanity. So at this point, she's going to remain sort of, invested in this connection with Trisolaris, and she eventually builds the ETO, the Earth Trisolaris organization, in conjunction with that other fellow. What's his name?
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans, who is a sort of this radical environmentalist from the United States, who turns out to be the child of an oil baron, gets the oil baron's fortune after his father dies, and basically is like, you know what, Earth, we can't protect her ourselves. I'm so fed up with everything. He's even more nihilistic than her in that he's like, I just like want Earth to be like destroyed, like purged in holy fire.
And the thing of it is, like, he can afford to be.
Yes, exactly. And that is notable that they have this guy who is like, I'm such a doomer, be a billionaire son and then a billionaire, a fossil fuel billionaire. I thought that was for all his saying that he's not political, that's a pretty charged political statement there from Liu, and I appreciate it.
Well, and like buying a ship called the Judgment Day, from which you plot the destruction of humanity in the glorious ionized fire of the Trisolaran cannons, right? Like that is such a fucking Elon Musk thing to do. Yes, it is. The only difference is this guy has his original, like, I'm gonna work and save the birds scene, because she does meet him in China trying to save these like sparrows, I think it is. And it's like this idea of like he's like this guy who's actually working with his hands to try and make something better in the world, but it's just him trying to escape his past, trying to escape his bourgeois background. But ultimately he has not come over to China to try and participate in building some grander project. He's just there to kind of just prove something with his sweat. And once he inherits his billions,
he's not using it to save those exact birds.
There's no shred
There's
of
no
humility
project.
in what he's doing.
Yes, he wants people to know he's working so hard to save the birds. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And then when he gets the capacity to, it's not good enough for him anymore. Notably, this is he's still making money from the oil. You know what I mean? Like he's not saving. He's not. He had this formative experience as a kid, seeing an oil spill really destroy a lot of nature. But now that he's the one in the driver's seat, he has fully adopted the logic of the bourgeoisie, the logic of, well, this can be no other way. And he has said, since it can be no other way, it is this or death, and I choose death. And that is somehow the progressive choice in his mind, which unfortunately is like a real mentality. Of course, this is taken to a massive extremity because it has aliens, but there is a real mentality behind the person who says, this is the only way things can be, because they are so indoctrinated with the ideology of capitalism, that they're like, well, we might as well just end this thing, which is, of course, a false dichotomy. That is not how things are, but that is how this character is. That's how the ETO comes to be formed in this conjunction of these two characters. And it is this group sort of plotting to make humanity weaker for the invasion of the Tri-Solarians, or rather than weaker, to keep humanity from ascending to the level of the Tri-Solarians, because since they're so far away, it's going to take 400 years for their ships to get here, traveling at, what is it, like a 50th of the speed of light or something like that?
50th or 100th, I forget the precise.
It's a 10th is at their fastest, but they can't go their fastest all the time, naturally.
Right, exactly. So it's yeah, as you say, 450 years is going to take them to get to us, by which time we have to unify and get our shit together. And it's been discussed earlier in the book, the difficulty of that. There's a theory out there that Liu delves into, that's like, oh, well, the contact with aliens, right, regardless of the length, regardless of the character of the contact, might actually serve as to divide us further rather than unite us.
Yeah, because everyone's going to freak out that there's aliens coming, and even the ETO can't really hold itself together, because while there's all these people who are like, yes, we are, what is it, Adventists and Redemptionists, is that right?
There's three factions. There's the Adventists, and they're just like, yeah, fuck the world, humanity's over. There's the Redemptionists. Shen Yufei is the leader of those, and they want to help the Tri-Solarians like figure out how to solve the free body problem. And then there's the survivors, and they want to help the Tri-Solarians, but they want to preserve like their own and their descendants' lives, and then everybody else dies. So
they're the enlightened centrists.
Yes. So yes, which is such a great sort of indictment of the enlightened centrists, right? It's like genocide, no genocide, some genocide.
Yeah, moderate genocide. Rein it in, guys, for real. And interestingly enough, they have very little contact with the Tri-Solarians. Aside from the Adventists, the rest of them don't actually know much about them. So they create an image of the Tri-Solarians in their head. Like, Shen is like worshiping the Tri-Solarians as a concept and calling them our lord and like this. And they don't know anything about the planet. Only the Adventists know stuff about the Tri-Solarians, because the Tri-Solarians have been in actual contact with the Adventists. Because, and again, we're getting into a lot of science, but this is like the whole book. This is not a very character-focused book. The Tri-Solarians created a particle-sized supercomputer that they shot across space to Earth, that they're using to communicate to the Adventists on Earth. Because nano waves can travel instantaneously across the universe, they can have instantaneous contact, even though if they were sending normal radio waves, it would take 4 years to reach.
Yes.
And there's a really neat part where they're like turning an atom, not even an atom, like a molecule,
proton,
proton into into different dimensions of space. So it's huge, and they're like inscribing circuitry on it. It's like over my head, but in a way that I really appreciated.
Well, the thing of it is, like, because I said before, the physics of it don't interest me too much, but where it gets into like the fantasy, and again, I went to school for English, right? I don't know.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about what is and isn't theoretically possible physics wise. So if indeed this stuff is theoretically possible at some higher stage of civilization, please direct all your hate mail to me. But it's it actually got interesting to me, the science of it, when it got into this kind of fantasy space of
Sure.
taking this, because in our perception of it, in our lower dimensional perception of this proton, yeah, it's just this infinitely like small thing, but they can unfold it at the point that they've reached technologically into this higher dimensional sort of space. So they unfold it and they work on it in like because they can perceive these things in 11 dimensions, right? So they can come at it from all sorts of different angles, and when you're looking at something that's like 3-dimensional in an 11-dimensional space, suddenly it's like infinitely more huge. And as you
In
said,
fact,
they
they
can describe
discover
stuff
like
on
a
it.
consciousness in one of the protons.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
They,
it hits them. It hits
yeah,
them.
with
It
lasers.
radicalizes them. Yeah, it radicalizes them. Like, well, you know what? If there's some kind of consciousness in here, it's an intelligence. It's perhaps even a civilization on a scale and of a character that we haven't really figured out how to comprehend. But you know what? If we are any qualms about us destroying this civilization on the other side of the galaxy, let those be laid to rest now, because who knows how many civilizations, how many intelligences, how many quadrillions, like quintillions, untold numbers of beings, incomprehensible, genocides of incomprehensible scale we have just casually committed by sneezing,
Right.
like we've done all that up to this point. What is one more, done
Yeah.
consciously or not?
Yeah, it's a very, fascistic logic.
Yes.
Intentionally portrayed as such. And that's the sort of the aliens' internal logic
Mm-hmm.
as they're, preparing for this invasion of Earth. But it is also what these proton computers are also what they're using to screw with our physics. It is what they're using to do things like make stuff show up in pictures, like make our collider experience go wacky. And it is what they're using to make these scientists go crazy and kill themselves because they're messing with their perception so much. They say reality isn't real, I'm physics isn't real, and they go over the edge because of this. And it's what they're using to make the background radiation of the universe supposedly flicker by making this field around the Earth. And they're doing it to impede human progress because right now humans are weak compared to them because humans don't have the ability to control matter at the sort of quantum level, and don't have the ability to do anything in other dimensions beyond just the basic three. However, humans have a very fast rate of evolution. They were saying, like, they talking about, oh, humans went from just speech to steam to the nuclear age to the information age relatively quickly. In 400 years, by the time we get there, they might be able to take us on. So basically, they're sabotaging humans, and they're using humans like the Adventists to sort of sabotage other humans to keep, the Earth in check. So that by the time that their ships arrive, they'll be able to crush them. And you have this moment where you have this moment after all is revealed, where Wang is sort of standing around the ETO, and they've all met together, and it's this moment where all has been revealed, and everything's there's a lot of chaos going on, and and there's this standoff between the police and the military and the ETO, and there's a shootout, and it's complicated, and Da Shi almost dies in this moment, and you basically have the Trisolarians send their last message not too long later, or well, actually, it's a little later, but but I can go ahead and say it. These Trisolarians will later send this message just saying to all of them, well, you're all bugs. We're going to squash you anyway, and you're not going to be able to advance any further because of our, our interference. But that does actually happen after like the kind of the last scene, the last like action moment, which is like really Wang's main like one of his main contributions to this like quote unquote war effort, the scene with the big boat.
Yes, because it's mentioned before that he's gained renown for his invention of these nanoscale
Yeah.
wires that once upon a time, were theorized to be able to use for the space elevator that we're building, but now have to be put to the purpose of a decidedly more earthly, decidedly less peaceful war effort.
Yeah, an idea that Da Shi cooks up, which basically is like make an invisible net over the Panama Canal. And when this Judgment Day boat comes through, it'll slice the thing to pieces. We'll take all their information they have on the Trisolarians, and they'll all be dead, presumably.
Yes,
and it goes off without a hitch.
And it's out of this scene. If I can advance my favorite little passage in the book, where my favorite passage comes from. They're meeting. We didn't mention this earlier, but or we touched on it earlier, but it's shocking at first to Wang that the organization that he falls in with that's investigating the ETO is international, right? It's multi-governmental. There are people from China there, of course. There are people from America, like there's NATO guys, like all people who ordinarily would be fighting are, united on this particular problem.
Actually, really quick thing, the show does it slightly differently, and it's actually very funny when they're all together. I don't know why they made this choice, just maybe to be shady. I don't know. But when all the people are gathered, and it says, and here is this general, like looking very American, it says, from a country in North America. And it identifies all the other ones, but it says, and he's very clearly American. I think he even has the flag. He just says from a country in North America. And it's not like a poorly translated show. Like it's very intentional. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm gonna start introducing myself as, I'm from a country.
Yeah, I'm from a country in North America. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but very similarly, like Da Shi sort of gets a shot in at the Americans here. There's an American, Colonel Stanton, who's introduced to him. She is mouthing off at this meeting, and Stanton's like, who does this policeman think he is that he can talk to us this way? Who do you think you are? Da Shi asked. Colonel Stanton is an expert in special ops, a NATO officer said. He has been a part of every major military operation since the Vietnam War. Then let me tell you who I am. More than 30 years ago, my reconnaissance squad managed to sneak dozens of kilometers behind Vietnamese lines and capture a hydroelectric station under heavy guard. We prevented the Vietnamese plan to demolish the dam with explosives, which would have flooded the attack route for our army. That's who I am. I defeated an enemy who once defeated you.
Got his ass.
Yes, got his ass, totally. It's again, it's something that I love. He's among people who are, incredibly qualified, incredibly lettered and degreed, and have incredible pedigrees in science and whatnot. And among all these physicists, here's a guy who gets by through, a crude application of the transitive property. X is greater than Y, so X is greater, and Y is greater than Z, so X is greater than Z, right?
This guy has been on like Who Would Win forums.
Yes.
But he always wins in his estimation. It's funny because like he gets kicked out of the room for being disrespectful, but he's just like, as he's walking out, he's like, yeah, I could use those nano ropes, and he leaves and like, shoot, he's right, call him back in. And that's why he's a very fun character in this. I mean, his book is full of like what can be only described as different variations of like Egghead, aside from Da Shi.
Yes.
They're all just people who are in, various beliefs, various moral backgrounds, various temperaments, but they're all just people who are just incredibly science brained to the point of it like is almost crippling, aside from him. And he's just like chilling, smoking a cigar or smoking a cigarette, just sort of waiting to say a quip and end up actually having some wisdom hidden in there if you're willing to pay close enough attention. That's what makes him interesting. And he's actually it is also a passage from him that is my favorite quote as well. And it's notable. It's very like at the very end of the book, after the Trisolarians have just been like, y'all are bugs, everybody's kind of freaked out by that naturally. And they're like, well, they're not coming for 400 years, but it's kind of weird to just live knowing the human project is fundamentally over. And Wang is, out there and he's getting drunk and he's upset. And Da Shi drags him out to a field and shows him all these locusts, right? These locusts out in the field, eating up the crops. And he says to him, quote, "Look at them, the bugs. Humans have used everything in their power to extinguish them. Every kind of poison, aerial sprays, introducing and cultivating their natural predators, searching for and destroying their eggs, using genetic modifications to sterilize them, burning with fire, drowning with water. Every family has bug spray, every desk has a fly swatter under it. This long war has been going on for the entire history of human civilization, but the outcome is still in doubt. The bugs have not been eliminated. They still proudly live between the heavens and the earth, and their numbers have not diminished from the time before the appearance of the humans. The Trisolarans, who deem the humans bugs, seem to have forgotten one fact. The bugs have never been truly defeated."
Mm-hmm.
And I did appreciate that. I liked that perspective on it, like another way of looking, where he's just like, well, we're not going to lose. We're not going to be eliminated. It is this moment of sort of that transcends the harsh calculations that Phil finished most of this book. Like, yes, it is sort of based on a sort of science, but it is also at the same time just saying like, no, we're going to have this transcendence, this triumph. And I have not read the sequels, but I do know for a fact that the humans don't get just squashed by bugs. I don't know the final conclusion, but I know there is more to it than just that.
Well, and what's interesting to me, I have that precise passage, like, exactly that passage, every word highlighted as well, because it was really striking to me. And what's interesting to me is that you read when you're reading about climate change, you read about the loss of insect biomass and how potentially catastrophic that's going to be for the environment, for human civilization, more pertinently to us. Which interested me because there is in fact this end scenario for insect life, or for at least a critical mass of insect life. Not because of anything that we particularly want to do, not because of anything that perhaps we're consciously trying to do, but that's the thing. Like, as soon as that if that struggle is to end, if this particular dialectic is to resolve in one way or another, then that's the end for us as well.
Yes, exactly. It is only in self-destruction that destruction is effective. And I had a similar thought where he was like, well, the population has not decreased. And it's like, well, it has, but not because we swatted so many of them. You know what I mean? Not because we were like, oh, we did a really good job, putting fertilizer on our crops. That wasn't like with that particular idea in mind. In fact, it was all incidental. So yeah, I found that to be interesting. And ultimately, the book concludes kind of on that note of the Trisolarans are coming. They're not coming for a very long time. Is the Earth going to band together, or is the Earth going to tear each other apart now that we know about aliens? It's this moment of history is now in flux. You have a character at the beginning who has a conversation where he just says, he's this general, and he's like, yeah, humans have been pretty fortunate up till now that there's not been anything that's really just completely disrupted us dramatically. We have been able to evolve in relative peace without being disturbed from the outside. The idea is we haven't had anything forced on us from without that has fundamentally shifted the conditions under which we are operating, which I found interesting. I also thought about climate change when he talked about that as well. The idea of like, we've been able to operate within a relatively stable climate for, our species existence. And now we are simply not going to be dealing with those conditions. So I found that to be an interesting way of looking at it. But also the concept of, well, we are introduced now to a scenario in which everything is in flux. We are introduced into a scenario in which there is chaos put on us from the outside, and that is sort of in its nature the three-body problem, the unsolvable problem. Though this book does posit that perhaps it is solvable, but that's not even really what is sort of decided inside of it,
Mm-hmm.
It ends up not really being the point whether you can solve the three-body problem or not.
Right. The point is in the attempt.
Right. And that's where it leaves off. And it's a very, I'll read the sequels eventually, but the sequels are not the same characters. They take place very in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The third one in the very distant future. So this is very, this is a self-contained book. a self-contained story. And yeah, I walked away from it with a very interesting a lot of very interesting concepts, a very interesting look at a culture that I don't get to work with a lot. On the level of a book, I found it engaging. I found it interesting. It was introducing new concepts. I'll say, this book is not particularly interested with things like character dynamics, that kind of thing. There are fun character moments, but like it's not super caught up in like, snappy dialogue. It's not super caught up in like the intricacies of a deep plot. It's not I don't find Liu Cixin to be like super invested in these characters. They feel a lot like props for the most part. However, I think he accomplishes with this book everything that he sets out to do, because it isn't for a lack. It doesn't feel like it fails in anything it attempts to be. Though I do have moments where I do want more out of, character, want more out of story. I also know that that's not really what this is.
Yeah, and it's and I mean, credit where it's due, right? Wenjie's story is legitimately compelling, and
Yeah, I
her
wish it
sort
had
of
kind of been concluded, though.
yeah,
Like, I wish it had been rounded out a little bit.
yeah, because she ends the last we see of her is she's being interrogated by our international sort of investigative body.
Right, and she visits Red Coast Base, right? And that's like the ruins of it. But
Yeah,
I'm not
and
really sure what her that doesn't. Sorry, what were you saying?
oh yeah, and like her whole journey, right, from victim of a particular excess of the Cultural Revolution to dooming humanity, perhaps in a fit of pique, to having that moment of regret, having that dark night of the soul, and then like doubling down. Like we kind of glossed over this, but once she figures out what's going on with the aliens and that she's talking to them, she realizes, oh, the guys who recruited me are the only people really, because now there's a skeleton crew at that point running the base. So like there's only the guys that recruited her who can piece together what exactly she's doing.
Who she's married to one of.
Yes, she's married to one of them by this time, and she makes the decision, you know what, like I'm gonna have to kill this guy. I'm gonna have to kill them both. And she does. She drops them both off a cliff.
And I mean, and even her child later on, her actions lead to the death of her child as well.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly. And
she's cold.
That's what's interesting. So I couldn't help but think of Jurassic Park as I read this book, because it mentions chaos theory directly. Like it mentions that, part of what makes the three-body problem so difficult is that the initial conditions of these three celestial sort of spheres acting on each other, you can predict where it starts, but not necessarily how they progress, right? So and as with you see a parallel in something like the Cultural Revolution, where it starts, right? You have this huge project to radically transform society and cleanse it of its reactionary, of its counter-revolutionary, of its bourgeois elements. And you can say, hey people, go do this, go learn from your revolutionary past, and build something on top of it. But you can't necessarily predict how millions of people, particularly young people, are going to act.
Right. Especially, in those incredibly chaotic, tense conditions. Yeah, absolutely. I also think I just, to sort of bounce off what you were saying with that, it's worth noting that this has the fact that this has had such a massive impact on people, I think, is more than just the fact that it's interesting conceptually. I think that does speak to people, and it has been very popular, especially in China. The TV show as well. The TV show has been very successful. I just watched the beginning of the TV show. I've not gotten into it. There's a lot of it. I enjoyed the beginning of it. I found it to be pretty good. Everyone to be very well cast. I thought it would indicate things in the 60s by playing this same, or 60s and 70s by playing this same marching tune when it would transition back time. It was like very well. The show, in fact, the show opens with the first shot is that music playing in a very dark room where you can't see anything, and you just see a red button, and you just see a young woman who I know to be Ye just hit the button and then it goes into the intro. And I find that to be a very
Ah.
effective start to the whole thing, because that really is the crux on which all of this turns. But you mentioning Jurassic Park did make me think, oh, a mistake that Lou make is not putting Ian Malcolm in this narrative, because imagine what Ian Malcolm would be doing in the three body game. Are you kidding me? You would not get that dude out of the suit. You would
Oh
not
yeah.
be able to get that man out of the suit. There's
And
no doubt.
would he I mean, he wouldn't be an Adventist, he would be a redemptionist. Absolutely.
Yeah, but like in a very like he would have like his own. He would definitely have his own take on it.
Oh yeah.
He would probably decide that like the spaceships weren't going to reach Earth, like they were going to mess up or something. He's like they can't do that. They can't go 4 light years. Think about it. There's too much chaos. There's too many nebula in between here and there. That kind of thing.
Now I'm thinking of Ian Malcolm like having visions of the like Trisolaran civilization just in his like last morphine dream before the Costa Rican Air Force napalms him.
Yeah, he's just like laying there. He's like, they're dried out, man. Like, wait, life finds a way. Life finds a way.
Exactly. Are you at the point in the show where Wang gets into the game yet?
I didn't get to that point in the show, but I did look and watch some like scenes from it. It does like a sort of like it's interesting. It's interesting how they like sort of represent it and have it like in this sort of digitized space. It's a fascinating. It's definitely a fascinating choice. The effects are really good.
Does the dehydration mechanic look as silly as I imagine it does?
I only saw a still of the dehydration. And yeah, it looks pretty silly. But I haven't seen a clip of them like dehydrating fully, so I'm not sure. Notably, they're also making an American version of this. Same guys who made Game of Thrones, known as D&D, the David Benioff and David Weiss.
Yes.
I don't have super high hopes for that. I don't really know why it's necessary, or we were discussing this earlier off the show, but like either this show takes place in America, in which the context doesn't really work, or it takes place, or Netflix is going to make a show depicting China during the Cultural Revolution, and that's going to be really problematic as well. It's not going to come with any of the nuance. It's not going to come with any of the, well, we are fighting against a century of colonialism. It's not going to come with any of the, well, people were doing their best. It's going to just be pure like raving at the mouth reactionary propaganda.
Yeah, and
so
at a time that we live in where the United States government is openly saying we have to contain China, we have to arrest China's rise, we have to prepare for major power conflict, right? And in the media, it's all, oh, there are these secret Chinese police stations. You people reading this, like there's outposts of this authoritarian government all around you.
Xi Jinping is in your walls.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you know what? If there's anybody who lives in my walls, I feel like Xi Jinping would be reasonably nice about it.
he's just chilling in there.
Yeah, he strikes me as a pretty chill guy.
Yeah, at least in like mannerism.
Yes, but yeah, in our current environment, like I don't have very high hopes, as you said, about Netflix really making something with the nuance that we would like it to be approached with.
That said, I will add this caveat. D&D, if you are going to make this show, it's not too late to turn back, but if you decide not to turn back, make this a show about why humanity needs to unite.
Yes.
This is your golden opportunity to make a very, very clear statement that this text gives you the ability to make.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you the ability to say, see these Chinese people, they're like you. We're all the same. We need to work together. And look, if we have to use the manipulation of pretending there's going to be an alien invasion, we'll use the manipulation of pretending there's going to be an alien invasion. Whatever it takes to stop a nuclear war. We're materialists here. We're going to make it happen.
Yeah. 100%.
But just thinking back across the book, and like I said earlier, I'm not like much of a hard sci-fi guy, so a lot of these concepts in it, some of the parts in it were like kind of jarring to me. Parts of it were like where it was like really getting into like the nitty gritty were very fascinating to me, but it wasn't. I don't feel like qualified to like really say like, oh, is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. I found it interesting. I found it works very well, so I thought it was very cool. I think that it would be super cool like to hear like an actual astrophysicist's opinion on things. I read some online and I found some people who are very impressed by the science in it. There are people with their criticisms, but that's just how it is. But But I wanted to say, despite all that, there are some moments that are like very that are touching. Like it has a few moments where it slows down and are touching, like the moment with the locusts. I wanted to read one more just because we've talked about the technicality of it a lot, and
Please.
it's a memory of Ye has of when she was briefly very sick after giving birth to her child, and she's staying in a small village. And it goes like this. Quote, in Ye's memory, these months seemed to belong to someone else, like a segment of another life that had drifted into hers like a feather. This period condensed in her memory into a series of classical paintings, not Chinese brush paintings, but European oil paintings. Chinese brush paintings are full of blank spaces, but life in Quijeton, I think it's Quijeton, I'm not sure, had no blank spaces. Like classical oil paintings, it was filled with thick, rich, solid colors. Everything was warm and intense. The heated Kang stove beds lined with thick layers of ura sedge. The guandong and mohi tobacco stuffed in copper pipes, the thick and heavy sorghum meal, the 65 proof baijiu distilled from sorghum, all of these blended into a quiet and peaceful life like the creek at the edge of the village, end quote. And it is a very rare moment in this book that it is slow and breathes for a second and shows quote unquote normal people, people that are just living their lives, even through the Cultural Revolution, even through everything, even in the shadow of this giant base, they're just normal people living very normal lives. And this is, you're this one moment where Ye has something like, melting her a little bit. It's not enough to change her trajectory, but it's not enough to change things on a grand scale. These are not people who would understand these concepts that are being worked with. She's treated by them as almost like a demigod because she is a scientist, but she is able to have a moment of legitimate experience these people. She's able to have this like brief moment of light with them. And that is a moment interjected in the book, I think, to remind you that, humanity is not lost, and that, that the Adventists are incorrect, and that these huge views of the universe, yes, they're important, and to look at all this science, yes, it's important, and to think existentially, yes, it's important, but it's also like okay for a moment to sit at the edge of a creek and have a drink and sit with some people that you care about and enjoy the sun, and and think, wow, this would be really pretty as a painting right now. And I appreciate that it's in there.
Yeah, for his ambition in depicting something impossibly vast, in depicting a story in an impossibly vast time scale and an impossibly vast distance scale, right? On a galactic in nature, right? Liu's remarkably good at drilling down and showing you these like really really intimate moments, like especially like the bit that I mentioned that's shared by Ye Wenjian, the pacifist Trisolaran across time. Like that's one of the most striking depictions of just utter loneliness and isolation that I've seen in fiction.
Right, and it uses it, and it does it, like I was saying, in a very technical way, a very unique type of way. It doesn't do the typical, it doesn't do the typical, I'm so tiny necessarily. It takes its own angle on it, and it's unique. It's a scientist's mind. That's why I appreciate, his writing. It's why I want to read more of his writing, and it fascinates me. And it makes me even more curious what reading it in the original translation would be like. I'm curious how much more of that may come through, or what of that comes from the translation of it, and why I try and note a lot of times that translation is very much an art, and that people who do a good job of translating from one language to another, conveying the original meaning. I greatly appreciate those people, because that is very difficult work that is often unsung. So for that, I also want to just, give a shout out to Kin Liu and others on the translation team for sure. Because while I can't say what it's like reading in the original, I do feel like I'm getting a very, I'm getting a good vision into this work, and in moments where it takes, and in moments, instead of sacrificing the narrative, it'll just add a footnote to give you some more explanation, and I appreciate that as well.
Yes, yes, especially because like it's because I don't know, it's been a long time since I took AP World History. I don't know who
Sure.
King Zhou of Shang was. I don't know that there's another like King Shang apparently. So that's there you get into the weeds there. Like it's providing the context, yes, is important for any translator. And to prevent that from being disruptive. But also again, materially, like this is the sort of story that people really need to be reading, right?
Yeah.
This is the concept of being alone, of being dwarfed by the sheer scale of the universe, and more pertinently to us by the problems that we face, and having the response be to band together as locusts do, consciously or otherwise, right? And to go on existing regardless.
Chinese, American, Trisolaran, we're all just some locusts for real.
Buzz.
We all some locusts for real. You got any other thoughts on this, Joss?
We keep seeing UFO stuff pop up in the news now and again, and I don't believe it for a minute. Like it always tends to pop up at like times that we should be focusing on other things, though of course there's so much wrong with this society and the world in general that we ought to be focusing on. Like where do you stand on the whole alien life thing? Have we been contacted, or do you think they're staying away?
I mean, as someone who has given it a lot of thought, my thought process is I tend to be on the side of the explanation of Fermi's paradox, that it is the idea of the great filter, that there is a moment where civilization, people say the great filter idea is there was a moment that usually kills off civilizations, right? And so some people say, oh, it's climate change, right? They kill themselves, or nuclear war or whatever. I have always said, well, maybe just abiogenesis is way more difficult than we thought. Maybe it's just more difficult for life to come into existence than we thought. And maybe the universe isn't empty, but it might just be life might just be really, 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 really far away. And, for the reasons cited in this book, it's difficult to get radio waves really, really far away. And if they're not at the next star over, the next star over after that, then it would actually be pretty difficult to get in contact with them. So my thought process is, yeah, they're probably out there, and yeah, it's probably hard for us to get in touch, and it might be a while. So let's sort our own things off, so when they show up, we can be on our best behavior.
Yeah, give again, calling back to Left Behind, give the extraterrestrial beings a world to come to that he would be proud of.
Yes, and I do actually really, if you ever get a chance to read through the greetings from multiple languages that were sent out into space, I actually really appreciate that, because a lot of the countries of the world got together and like sent out in the mid 20th century, sent out a lot of messages out into space, and I actually really appreciate some of them. They're like, they can be really sweet. Here it is. These are messages that were put on the Voyager spacecraft. I'm just going to read a few of them, okay? And different countries were allowed to make their own edition. And these are all translated, but they're written in their original languages, okay? So Japanese wrote, "Hello, how are you?" Persians wrote, "Hello to the residents of the far skies." The French wrote, "Hello, everybody." English just says, "Hello from the children of planet Earth." Marathi says, "Greetings, the people of Earth send their good wishes." In Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, "Hope everyone's well. We are thinking about you all. Please come here to visit when you have the time." In Oriya, "Greetings to the inhabitants of the universe from the third planet Earth of the star Sun." In Greek, "Greetings to you, whoever you are. We come in friendship to those who are friends." In Armenian, "To all those who exist in the universe, greetings." Russian, very simple, just greetings. There's a bunch, but my favorite is in Amoy. It's a Min dialect. "Friends of space, how are you all? Have you eaten yet? Come visit us if you have the time." And that's my favorite one. "Have you eaten yet?" I think it's a greeting. I like that a lot.
It's universal, right?
Yeah.
You have heaven knows how they eat, if they eat, but if there's life, it has to have some way of reproducing itself. So I imagine that would translate.
It's a very sweet idea, if nothing else. And it's been said before, but if they do, if aliens do find our world and we're long gone, maybe at least they'll find our robots and they'll say, well, they named them Voyager, they named them Curiosity, and maybe that'll reflect nicely on us that's what we named our machines that we sent out into space.
And absolutely.
But let's hope we can meet them.
Yeah, presumably they'll forgive us for Kurt Waldheim's voice being on it. Kurt Waldheim being a former Wehrmacht intelligence agency.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe they just won't know about that. We'll just kind of cover our eyes on that one.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that is that's kind of the extent of my thoughts on this book that I feel like I can, express. I know that this has been maybe a more convoluted episode than normal just due to the nature of this book, but I do appreciate that we got into it and that we sort of tackled it, because I think it is, like we were saying, worth doing, even if it's kind of both outside of our wheelhouse, outside of, our cultural thing, our cultural milieu, and, just sort of outside of what we typically are into. I still think it was it's definitely was worth the conversation and worth the investigation,
Oh yeah. No, I took a few extra days on this, looking into the background of it, because again, it's the story is a titanic scale. The cultural revolution, the history of China, like the backdrop that it's set against, it's it's so complex to dive into, and but again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't just take a chance and dive into it,
Yes, and I actually am planning on, due to the complex nature of this issue, the Cultural Revolution, linking some resources on the Cultural Revolution from principled source, from the Liberation School in the description of this episode. So
Yes.
if you've got the time, check that out, because that is a worthy resource right there. So I'm going to be trying in the future too to be saying ahead of time what our next book is going to be. And I can't promise this will always never go off the track. But provided everything goes well, provided everything goes normally, our next book is going to be Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. And so we're going to do another type of sci-fi, not hard sci-fi, but another type of sci-fi. Yeah, if you are if you're part of that shelf life, if you're a shelfer, and you're trying to read before you get into it, or read a summary before you get into it, yeah, in a couple weeks we'll be having Slaughterhouse 5. So look forward to that.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it. I've only
Yes.
ever read Mother Nights, so I'm still very, very relatively new to
They
to
exist in the
Vonnegut.
same. They do exist in the same universe. There's actually a character that crosses over between Mother Night and Slaughterhouse 5.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, confirmed. Same universe.
Cool.
You can't miss it. You'll see it's the main character of Mother Night. Great. Okay. Well, with that, I think Josh said it earlier, but buzz, it's locust time, so, be good to each other, and, remember, we all some locusts for real. Anything else from you, Josh?
We only have one planet, and let's do right by it.
Let's do right by it. And if you're thinking of hitting that big red button, talk to a counselor, have a conversation with your husband who may or may not have kidnapped you.
Have a really difficult birth and go out into a village and recover,
Yes, before you, and then consider hitting the red button. But have that moment before. If it's in the middle of the night, at least wait till the middle of the day, consult with somebody. Thank you very much. All right. You have a good one, everybody. See ya.
Peace out.